CVE-2016-0800, aka Drown, or the decrypting RSA with obsolete and weakened encryption. What is it, and how do you fix it? Hey everyone, my name is Greg. I'm an IT guy and certified professional nerd, and if you stick around, I'm going to be talking about what Drown is at a high level, or you can click here to see how to fix it. So first of all, Drown is a server-side exploit. If you're a customer or an average Joe, you're not running a server, you can probably skip this video. As much as I appreciate you checking me out, don't forget to like and subscribe. The vulnerability itself was disclosed on February 29th by a team of researchers, and they estimated that 33% of all web servers in the world are affected in some way, shape, or form by this exploit. That's a lot of servers. So this exploit itself actually affects Windows, Linux, and I guess Mac, though I don't know why you would possibly want to run a production web server on Mac hardware. I mean, it's your money. I guess you do whatever you want to do. So it's not directly an OS exploit, but all three OSs could be running a piece of software that is affected by this exploit. There's crypto libraries or cryptographic libraries like OpenSSL or NSS. There's email servers or SMTP servers like Postfix or Outlook. And then there's web servers like Nginx or Apache or Microsoft's IIS. Realistically, anybody running a secure application that is accepting SSL, you should probably pay attention. So how do you know that you're vulnerable? Well, that really falls into one of two cases. Either one, your server is accepting SSL version 2 connections. In that case, you're vulnerable. SSL has been deprecated for quite a while, so if your server is accepting SSL connections, it's one of two things. You probably either have a misconfiguration, in which case just go out and fix it and you should be fine, or you're running some awful, terrible legacy code. The other option is if you have a private key that you're sharing amongst a couple of different servers, and one of them is supporting an SSL connection, then the other is vulnerable. So the common example of this is if you have a shared private key on both your email and your web server, and your web server happens to be accepting an SSL connection, attackers can actually leverage that SSL exploit to attack your email server. In the industry, we would call that ungood. The exact way that you would fix this particular exploit really depends on the application that we're talking about. The application's installed on the server that you're going to be looking at. But the basics of it are very simple. Disable SSL. You shouldn't be using it anyway. Now I'm going to jump down to the command line and we're going to take a look at some specifics for how you actually go about not only testing but also updating and fixing some of these problems. Anyone who skipped the first part of the video, I'm really going to be covering three types of applications: cryptographic libraries, specifically NSS and OpenSSL, email servers, Postfix specifically, and then web servers, and I'm really going to be covering Apache, but the same logic applies for IIS and Nginx. So, from the command line, I'm going to cover a couple of different ways that you can prove out which version of a particular application you're using and whether or not your version is patched, and then how to drop in some of the configuration updates that we'll be talking about. So let's start with NSS. As long as you have a version newer than 3.13, you should have SSL version 2 disabled by default, but obviously you're going to want to do your due diligence and just verify that. Verification is the name of the game with all of this. So with OpenSSL, it gets a little bit trickier. If you have version 1.0.2, you're going to want to upgrade to at least version 102G, as in Gulf. For version 101, if you have 1.0.1, you're going to want to upgrade to 1.0.1 Sierra. So let's take a look. How do you figure out what version of OpenSSL you have? Well, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. Let's do a yum list OpenSSL 101 Echo E. But available, we have two different versions. You have the 32-bit and 64-bit libraries, but guess what? Those are both 101E. Okay, so when was the last update for this particular version of OpenSSL? So for that, we're going to do an RPM -q --changelog OpenSSL. And so what this is going to do is query that particular package. And let's scroll up here to the top. Okay, so if you look here, this is the last update. So we are definitely running a vulnerable version of OpenSSL. So how are we going to fix that? Well, easiest way, yum update OpenSSL. Yes, I want to install. And again, we're going to run the same RPM -q -- changelog OpenSSL. We're going to look to the top of the changelog to see right there. So we're getting close. Red Hat is in the process of pushing the patch. So I'm going to have to wait a little bit before I find the particular update that addresses that vulnerability, or I can always go out and compile my own from source. That's pretty much outside the scope of what I'm going to be doing here, so we're going to skip that. Okay, for email servers, there's a ton of them out there. I'm really only going to be talking about Postfix. That's what we happen to use in my environment. And even the Postfix configuration is pretty daunting. So what I'm actually going to recommend is you go over to drownattack.com, and this is the website for the security researchers that actually disclose the vulnerability. And I'm looking specifically at, they've got some recommended settings for Postfix that actually address the SSL version 2 and 3 vulnerabilities. So I'm going to recommend that you read through this configuration to understand what it does. I have taken the time to do this. So in the interest of time, I'm going to just copy this, and then we're going to go back to the command line and check out etc postfix main.cf, right? And we're just going to paste it in down at the bottom. Once you have that in place, service postfix restart, and that's all there is to it. Okay, last thing, and then we can all go home. Let's talk about web servers. Now, again, I'm going to be focused on Apache just because that happens to be what I'm using in this particular environment. If you're using Microsoft's IIS, as long as you're running something newer than version 7, you should be good to go. Anything newer than version 7 has SSL version 2 disabled by default, but again, trust but verify. If you're running Nginx, drownattack.com is your best friend here. Now, it looks like with Nginx and Apache, they're having a little bit of difficulty getting some information back from the developers of those two apps. So you're probably going to want to keep an eye on either drownattack.com or wherever else you're going to get your kind of security and vulnerability of information. It sounds like there might be some more to follow. So let's dig in on Apache. Now, if you're running Apache version 2.4 and you are not sharing any keys, then you're okay. Apache 2.4 disables SSL version 2. If you're running Apache 2.2, SSL version 2 is enabled by default. And the way we can figure out what version of Apache we're running here, httpd version. I am running Apache version 2.2, and I'm going to have to make sure that all of my website configurations specifically disallow SSL version 2. And while I'm at it, you might as well throw in version 3. So how are we going to do that? Let's do grep -r, and what we're looking for, SSL protocol, and we're going to look in etc httpd conf. I have 3 sites listed here, and only one of them has the correct syntax. Let's start with the first one here. So SSL protocol -all. If you see the minus sign, what we're saying is disallow that. The plus sign means allow specifically that. So if we see -all, we're saying disallow everything. Plus, we're going to allow SSL version 2, and we're going to allow SSL version 3. If I were to turn Apache on, that site would 100% be exploitable by this particular vulnerability. We're gonna want to change that. Let's look at the next one. All plus TLS version 1.2. Now, this is actually redundant because if you have all of them enabled, you're automatically including TLS version 1.2, but more importantly, you're also including SSL version 2 and SSL version 3. So we need to change that one too. So that means the last one here, -all plus TLS version 1.2. Now, I'm specifically opting to use TLS version 1.2. I would recommend that you use TLS version 1.2, but there are applications out there that may not play nice with that. But the important thing here is that we're saying -all. So get rid of everything and only allowing one specific protocol that happens to not be SSL. All of these other sites should be updated to say -all plus TLS version 1.2. Let's go ahead and make those changes. Let's edit another site. Come down here. and we're just going to say plus TLS version 1.2, restart Apache, and that's it. Okay, so there you have it. Now, this is by no means a complete rundown of all the different possible options or all the possible applications that are vulnerable. This is really meant to just be a real quick high-level talk about what the problem is and then some very common ways to fix the most commonly affected applications. I really hope that you like what you saw here. If this was helpful to you at all, please like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what other kinds of videos you'd like to see, and we'll see you guys next time.